Hello, and welcome to The Mastering Show. My name is Ian Shepherd. I'm a mastering engineer, and I run the Production Advice website, aiming to help you get the best out of recording, mixing, and mastering your music. And I'm really excited this week to have such a fantastic guest. Joining me is the amazing Sylvia Massy. I'm sure most of you already know about her, but she is an engineer, a producer, she's an artist, and she's written a fantastic new book. And I asked her to come on the podcast mainly because I think anybody listening to this should be buying her book and reading it because it's so fantastic. So Sylvia, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Ian. Thanks for inviting me.
So I'm sure that people do know about you, and you've done plenty of other interviews where you've kind of talked about your journey. But I mean, for just very briefly, Sylvia started out engineering. Which was the first? Was it Larrabee Studios, the first one?
Oh, I was in San Francisco when I started out recording, and I got to work with a very young Kirk Hammett co-producing a local San Francisco band. As far as having one good project that got a lot of attention, and when that band called the Sea Hags was signed to Chrysalis Records, I thought this was my big chance to work on a major label project. But at the time, they went to Los Angeles and worked with Mike Klink instead. So I realized that if I really wanted to do something, I needed to move to LA. And that's when I started working at Larrabee. But Kirk Hammett, he was a youngster. He had just joined Metallica, and they had just finished the album Master of Puppets when I worked with him as a co-producer on that project.
Wow, that's way back then.
Yeah, it was.
And then when you went to LA, you ended up working as an engineer and kind of assistant producer, I think, with just about everybody, like Aerosmith and Seal and Elton John and George Clinton and Tom Jones. And the one that jumped out at me was Prince, because I think I'm right in thinking, did you work on Diamonds and Pearls?
Yes, I worked on 3 different Prince projects, actually. When I first started working on the Prince sessions, he was finishing the Batman soundtrack, which was the first Batman movie. Mm-hmm. And then he went straight into Graffiti Bridge, which was the second movie to Purple Rain, the follow-up movie to Purple Rain.
Yep.
And the soundtrack to that, which was really, really quite special. And the third project was the Diamonds and Pearls. There were several other projects sprinkled in between those sessions, and because he was writing music for several different artists, other artists were using his songs. So he really had a factory going there at Larrabee and at other studios where each room had an engineer, and he would pop between rooms and write, record, and mix 2 songs per day, per room, per studio. So he was really very prolific during those years. And that was around 1989 through 93, I think.
Yeah, I remember that so well because that was when I was at college. So I mean, I've admitted to this before, so I shouldn't. I was getting bootlegs of his, like, the after show parties and stuff from the legendary gigs that he did, and I was actually kind of trying to remaster them myself. I had 2 boom boxes, and one of them had a graphic EQ, so I could roll the treble out in the quiet passages to reduce the hiss, and then bring it back up for the loud sections. I didn't know I was mastering back then, but with hindsight, that was kind of the first thing that I ever did.
No kidding, that's a great story.
Yeah, and I have just such fond memories of that time. And it's interesting as well because I don't know what kind of influence you or the studios where you were working would have had, but for me I kind of heard a change in his sound around them, around about the time of the Batman album, that the whole sound kind of got bigger and more. It sounded to me like more produced, more, I don't know, deeper bass, sparklier highs, all that kind of stuff. I don't know whether that was a decision on his part or whether that was the influence of the people he was working with.
Well, I could say that some of his earlier recordings were done at his place on his API with Susan Rogers engineering, no doubt a lot of it. But when he came to LA, I think he was using SSL consoles at that time, solid state logic, for the most part in those studios. and that would have changed the sonic character of the music. But one thing I did notice is when he was doing the recordings in LA, that he would push the levels to tape so much harder than any other artist that I'd ever worked with, because we were very careful to align the tape machines, and we were conservative with levels, so that we wouldn't oversaturate the tape. But that's exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted that sound. And I think that came from his early days working on the API, is that he got really used to that real grainy, vintagey kind of funk with a lot of fur on it. You know what I mean? From pushing the levels. It was a different sound when you do the same type of treatment through an SSL. So I can understand why there was a change in the sound. Plus, there was a whole hell of a lot of tracks available in those bigger studios in LA. Even though he did really grow his own studio at Paisley Park too, around the same time. I understand. I didn't ever go to Paisley Park to work. I was offered a job there towards the end of my time with. I didn't take him up on it, actually. So.
Well, that was when things were just starting to take off for you, was it? Was that around about the time of Tool and?
Exactly. I'd been working with Prince on and off for 3 years, and I just had gotten the offer to work on the Tool record as producer. And then the Prince offer came in at the same time, and I just said, I'm very sorry. I will have to take this other job, but I'm glad to, let's keep talking. But as soon as I turned him down once, I never heard from him again. Not surprising now.
No, I mean, see, there's a great story. And that was right at the beginning of your career. So the other early act that you worked on at Corpse Mire was Fishbone, which was another one at that time that I kind of just randomly, I don't know how I came across that album, but I loved that thing. It was insane.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of Fishbone. The work that Dave Kahn did with them producing, and so I got to I was an assistant on The Reality of My Surroundings, which was I believe their second one, maybe the third record, but it was a really astounding record with a lot of drama attached to it, in and out of the studio. And I did talk with Norwood Fisher years later about that experience. And yeah, there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes that no one would even imagine. Well, I suppose you could imagine crazy things happening in the studio with some of these bands. And but Fishbone, really an exciting band to see live, and also working with them in the studio was fantastic.
Oh, that's amazing. And actually, just to go back to what you were saying about Prince, it's really interesting because, I mean, the other thing that I'm kind of have a bit of a name for is banging on endlessly about the loudness wars. I'm kind of campaigning against the kind of the super crushed, super distorted sound that everybody is going for these days.
Sure.
And so it's really interesting to hear that, Prince was pushing everything really hot back then, because I think of his productions on the whole as being, kind of super clean. And by modern standards, they're really dynamic and, all the rest of it. Whereas I guess in some ways he would have been helping kickstart the trend, that has eventually ended up where we are today. Because these days, everybody's got a tape saturation plug-in, or
sure, yeah.
If they're really lucky, they've got a real tape machine, and it's kind of, for me, I just hear too much of that stuff now. I'm kind of bored with that. I'm like, can we go back to the cleaner sound, please?
Right. Yeah, there was something that he was doing that was different at the time, but now it's kind of become the norm. And we can thank people like Prince for that kind of change. And for some reason, it's comfortable to the ears to have a little dirt in there. I mean, well, maybe my ears are a little dirtier than most.
No, I agree with you. I've got nothing. It's a funny thing, because I'm talking about the loudness wars all the time. It comes from being a mastering engineer and just constantly asked to make stuff louder. But people assume that I'm anti-compression and anti-distortion. Actually, I love all that stuff, and I love all of those sounds. It's just when it gets put on everything, even kind of saccharine pop, and I just think use it where it's appropriate, use it where it achieves something emotional and musically, not just kind of as a preset on everything.
Absolutely. And using compression to bring everything forward also. This was something that I discussed with Jeff Emmerich about, and Jeff was the engineer on Revolver, the Beatles classic. and several, he worked with the Beatles all the way through.
Mm.
One thing that I thought was so wise that he said is that it's really important to have a background that's hard to see. Let the background be blurred in your mixes. You don't have to see everything. Let some of it fall into the back. And that's one thing I like to look at when I'm doing a mix is it important to hear every little bit of it? Is it, or is it better to let there be a big wash in the back that hides things that you can listen to again and again and go, oh, I hear this thing that I never heard before because it was always kind of masked in the background. So I think it's good for things to be out of focus in mixes and to let to not use a compression on everything to bring everything up into the front.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I haven't heard that he'd said that before. That's a really interesting kind of way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, so this is the Mastering Show, and we're not going to talk a huge amount about mastering because you're not a mastering engineer, but I am interested to know, I think you're the first guest I've had who's not been kind of directly involved in mastering in some way. How involved do you get with the mastering? Do you attend sessions? Is it different for every project? Do you just send it off and hope for the best? How does it work?
Well, I found over time that there's a few people that I like to send my work to, and that's because those people don't dig in too hard on what I send them. Just from the experience of having a couple projects come back really different than when I mixed it. I started doing pre-mastering here at the studio. So I would finish a mix, basically work on a mix, get it to where I think it's finished, and then I will put that mix through a stereo bus, EQ, and compressor, and then listen to my mix compared to other comparable mastered commercial songs that you would hear. Something sonically similar, but not necessarily the same genre of music. So, but I just want to hear the range of frequencies between the real sparkle on the top to the low end, and make sure that my low end is as tight as a mastered project, if it's possible to do that, and make sure that I've got enough clarity on the top, and that the vocal will stand through, and that there's not a real harshness to what I'm finishing. And that way, it seems that I am able to control what happens in mastering better, because sometimes I've sent projects to mastering engineers and it seems like they have some presets that they use on everything, and they'll just plug them right into my project and really change the perspective of the guitars and the low end, to the point where this is absolutely not the balance that I sent them.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that I do. It's a pre-mastering at the end of my mixes. I will do a pre-mastering before I commit those mixes to final.
And do you print those? Do you send those to the mastering engineer, or do you give them to him as a reference?
No, I'll print that. That's what I send. That's what I give. So, and part of that is because I want what I'm finishing to be representative of what it'll sound like when it goes to radio. Mm-hmm. And that's also because I usually work directly with an artist who doesn't understand necessarily that final step of mastering and what it does. So to save that final process for the mastering engineer to do, the artist will become confused, and they're like, well, your mix has got too much mid range, or your mix has got it's a little floppy on the low end, or whatever. However they are going to describe it, what they're describing is the stuff that the mastering engineer usually does, and I don't shake it off and say, hey, well, that's what the mastering let someone else deal with that. So I'll give them a representation of what the mastering engineer will do, and I'll try not to go heavy-handed on the compression, so that there is room for the mastering engineer to clean it up during that step.
That's interesting, and that kind of leads on to another question I was going to ask, which was, because I mean we'll get onto this in a minute. I mean, if I was trying to sum up what it is about you and about your book that I love, I would say it's a sense of mischief. I don't know whether you would agree with that. I saw an interview with you where you were talking to a guitarist and you were saying to him that you were going to plug his guitar basically into a power tool, and then record the output of the power tool. And the look on his face, and then the look of delight on your face when you saw the look on his face, it just made me laugh, because I just thought, yeah, you just like to, stir it up and get a reaction and get people excited and, knock them off balance slightly. So you can tell me whether you agree with that or not in a minute. But if that is the case, I wondered whether you had mastering engineers kind of say no effectively, or say, really, do you actually want to, I don't know how many of the kind of the creative techniques that you use make it into a mix and how blatant they are. But I could imagine, I know some mastering, I'm not this kind of mastering engineer. Some mastering engineers kind of, their clients almost expect them to kick stuff back to them, and they want them to tell them what's wrong and what the mastering engineer thinks should be improved. And then there's this dialogue, and then the mastering engineer doesn't do that much. Whereas I tend to accept what I'm given and kind of respect all the work that the artists have put in and just try and make the best of it, as in just bring out the best of it. But yeah, I was curious whether you've had people kind of say, do you really want to be doing this? And if that happened, whether you pay attention to it, or whether you just tell them to take a running jump.
Well, I have had a mastering engineer actually send me back a mastered project that had the guitars so loud, so much louder than what I'd sent him. And I said, hey, whatever you're doing to the mid-range with those guitars, can you not do that? I mean, it really didn't need that much. And the guy came back and said, well, this is what I always do. And I thought, well, I'm not going back to this person again. Heavy-handed mastering will work for some people, but not for me. I want to have the control over that. If I want to really screw it up and make something really honky sounding for some reason, then I want it to translate. I want the mastering engineer to acknowledge that that's the intention, and to not change it because it's what they always do. So yes, I have had some pushbacks. But then there's the people, like I say, the mastering engineers that have a very light touch, and they respect that there was something going on here with these mixes, and they're not going to fool around with it. They're just going to tidy it up a little bit, tighten up the low end, and put a little air or sparkle on the top. And those people that I could say Michael Romanofsky is great. The people at the Kitchen Mastering are great. And I also like John Cunaberity's work quite a bit. Tom Baker is fantastic. And there's others. But I like them because they don't go too far with it. And it's funny because I am adventurous, and I do like to go too far with things, but not my mastering engineer. Isn't that funny?
Well, it is funny because, I mean, it's one of the things I love about the book. I mean, so just quickly for anybody who's listening to this who doesn't know about Sylvia's book yet, it's called Recording Unhinged. And she talks about all of the kind of the ideas and stuff that she's come up with over her career, and also interviews 35 other engineers, I think.
Yeah, I think about 35 people.
Just legends in the industry. And it's great because you can kind of drop in and out of it, and it's got these fantastic illustrations by Sylvia. But just to give people an idea of the kind of some of the techniques that kind of jumped out at me were, there was the guitar through the power tool, which I love. There was building a microphone out of a telephone, which, by the way, you may have already done this, but my eldest boy is a huge Harry Potter fan, and he got I don't know how much you know about Harry Potter, but there's this thing in them called extendable ears, which they're these magical ears that you can drop down on a cord into another room to eavesdrop on people. And now there is an extendable ear toy, which is this kind of big rubber ear with a cable running out of it to a crappy little amplifier at the other end, and you put an earbud in it. And I'm reading your book and I'm thinking, I'm going to record something on my son's extendable ear.
That sounds fantastic.
I bet it sounds bizarre. Anyway, I think one time you hung a singer upside down. Is that right? To get him to try and elicit a better performance or a different performance?
That's right. When I was working with System of a Down on their debut album, I had the singer Serge hang upside down because I heard something about John Lennon having been hung upside down and swinging around in a room. And now, having talked to Jeff Emmerich, I think maybe that was just a fable. But
but somebody gaffer taped Peter Gabriel to a column, right?
True. That is true. That was a story from Bob Ezrin, who did the Peter Gabriel solo records, and they actually taped Peter Gabriel to a wall when he didn't give them the right performance. And Bob had threatened him, if you don't give me a better performance, I'm going to tape you to the wall. You're not, you're thinking about it too much. So now Peter Gabriel's up on the wall. They mic him up, and he sings beautifully because all of a sudden he's not thinking about his throat. He's thinking that he's going to fall off the wall, So these ways of distracting a singer can get a better performance out of them. There's all kinds of things you can do. Make a singer stand on a ladder, or put a singer in a closet. And in the dark, make them sing. And all of a sudden they're not thinking about, oh my God, my throat, I have a scratchy throat and blah, blah, blah. And suddenly they're just like, they're so distracted that they aren't self-conscious anymore.
See, I wish people could see your face now, because I can see that glee again. You're describing these things and you just love it. And so...
I do torture musicians. But sometimes they come here to my studio or have shipped me off to some weird land somewhere to get me to do these things, and I don't disappoint. This session I was doing last week, I had a band called Hypnotic Vibes here from Colorado, and they had a horn section, fantastic little horn section. And I thought to myself, well, why don't we do underwater horns? Well, we don't have a bathtub in the studio. We don't have a swimming pool. So we just got a big bucket of water. And I asked them, is it okay if we submerge your instruments? And they're like, yeah, sure. As long as it's not salt water or something. So, So I took a SM57 microphone and wrapped it in a condom with a rubber band and dunked it into the tub, and then I also did another mic over the tub, and then they dipped the bells of their instruments into the water, and I recorded them one by one, and it was fantastic. Some of these ideas don't work because you can imagine that, like throwing a guitar off a cliff, which I've done too. While it was doing a screaming feedback solo, you throw it off a cliff and you're miking the thing bouncing down the rocks. You would think that would sound awesome, but actually it wasn't nearly as awesome as you would think. So we weren't even able to find a place to fit that into that album. That was Machines of Love and Grace. But the experience of throwing a guitar off a cliff in Malibu, above the ocean, was really something that no one is ever going to forget. So
yeah, see,
that's an important. I think that's as important as actually getting something that was usable.
I completely agree with you. I think maybe that's one reason I love the book so much, is just that I don't get the opportunity to indulge in that kind of stuff that much as a mastering engineer, because people, they expect something different. And I remember back when I was just really young, I would write little bits of music with some friends of mine. And there was one time we were writing, it was you couldn't really call it a studio. It was just a collection of gear in a bedroom in a house. And it had been raining really heavily, and the window was open because it was really hot. And this bird started singing outside the window, and it was like, oh, this beautiful. So we quickly kind of scrambled around and got a mic out of the window, and then did a take, and we were just recording down to 2-track. And we have this kind of haphazard, kind of messy dubby, slightly reggae. We were into the orb back then and all this kind of stuff. And with this beautiful bird song over top and the occasional car going past. And I love that and that sense of occasion.
That's fantastic. As a mastering engineer, there are interesting things that you can do. So don't forget that when you're cutting vinyl, you have the end of the album, the inner circle of the album, and I don't know what technical term there is for that, but it's a continuous loop. So on one album that I did that we cut vinyl, it was for Mechanical Bride. The disc was 37 senses. At the end of the last song, we had an atomic bomb sound, and the sound of the bomb went into that loop on the inside of the vinyl, so it would never stop blowing up. So the initial bomb would go off, and then it was just this continuous explosion forever in the inside loop of the vinyl.
That's fantastic.
Continuous loop. And also on the Tools Undertow album, and this is not something that I did, but the band asked for this, and I thought it was so clever, there was a hidden track. Hidden tracks are something that now that we're in a digital world, it's not so easy to do, but there has to be a way to be able to do some kind of hidden track that it takes effort to find. It's a secret prize. Shall I
tell you my favorite?
Really? Tell me.
Yeah, what you can do, you probably know this, every ID on a track there's a start flag, which is where the song begins, and then there's an end flag. So, but what you can do is, in order to have gaps in between the songs, you have the end flag at the end of the song, then there's a gap, then there's the start of the next flag. What most people don't know is that there is there's a start flag for the beginning of the CD, and there's a pre-gap for the first track on the CD, just like there is for every other track on the CD. So what you can do is you can hide an entire song or more in the pre-gap for the first track on the CD. So when somebody puts it in and presses play, it plays from the start of track one. The only way to hear the track that's in the pre-gap is to rewind back before the beginning of the CD.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. I know on Tool Undertow, what they did is at the very last song on the CD that's listed, they continued numbers. So it was, I think, 13 tracks, and it went to 14 and 15 and 6. And they kept counting with 1 second in between until it reached the number 69. And then at 69... I
wonder why they chose that number.
Well, I wonder why they chose that number. But at 69, the secret track would start. But I love the idea of having to rewind from song one to get to the secret track. But now the problem is that can you do that digitally, or is it only with CDs that will work? The thing that you're describing.
You can only do it on a CD, because when you a file is a file, once you rip it. I mean, if you rip that CD, probably most players would ignore the hidden track, which is nice because it makes it really hidden. Right. Or maybe you could be clever and get it to somehow capture that as well. But yeah, once it becomes a file, no, you're right. It's the opportunities. I think somebody needs to do some serious work into that.
I think so too. I think we better do some brainstorming on this. I think that I think that there are possibilities on how we can really fuck things up. And we must find a way.
Well, what we need is the digital equivalent of, because you can do that thing on vinyl, can't you, with the double groove, where so when the needle drops in, it hits either one groove or the other, and you get completely different songs on each one. I think Jack White did that recently. So yeah, we need a digital equivalent of that. There's definitely some work to be done there.
Yes.
It sounds like it's what I thought. It's for you. It's almost as much about the story and the experience of recording and mixing as the sound, or, I mean, obviously it's about the performance, but you're kind of using those strategies in your book to get different performances or better performances from artists. I mean, the other thing is you're definitely a gear nut. It seems to me, you love your Neve console, and your pre's and your compressors and your stay levels and all this kind of this stuff. I mean, one of my big things on the website and kind of elsewhere is I'm kind of constantly saying to people, it ain't what you use, it's the way that you use it.
Right.
So I'm kind of almost arguing the opposite in the sense that I'm telling people, actually, yes, it's nice to have a really nice console and some really nice mic pre's and some really nice converters and all the rest of it, but that's not the crucial thing. It's all about the performance. It's all about the energy that goes into it and the end result. And these days you can get great results with kind of affordable gear. What's your favorite? Because I mean, there are so many things. Everybody listening to this has to go out and buy the book because there are so many great ideas in there. There's like recording the drums through a rubber tube to get a kind of a room sound without the top end. And yeah, there's so many. What's your favorite, if I have to put you on the spot, of the kind of crazy bits of gear that you come up with that you could tell people about?
Oh, well, the one thing that I use almost every session, and I have a mix up right now and I'm using it in the mix, is this old crusty broadcast compressor that I use to some drums, and I add that into the mix to give it a little graininess and to let the kick and snare kind of poke through a little more. And that's something that I use. It's just the crustiest old crappy thing that is actually useful. I also use a lot of great old mics, but then I've found a few new mics that I'm very excited about. One is a Soyuz SU-017, which is Russian made. It's a handmade tube mic, and
it's called Soyuz. Has it been into space?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it's the same company that actually sent the satellites into space, but
shame.
But this is something new that you can get. It's a fantastic mic. Something that I use on every mix, which is a change from previous years, is I've discovered that using old passive transformers across the stereo bus adds a special color to my mixes. And there's different ones that you can get. The Western Electric 111Cs are on the mix right now. And what they are, they're just big old blocks of iron. And you wire them up just so that your audio goes through them. I have two matched transformers. They're passive, so there's no power going to them at all, but you're just putting your audio through these things, and it just adds a great thickness and color to these mixes. And so that's a big change, and kind of a secret weapon that I've been using lately. Not a secret anymore, I guess. There's other great transformers, not just these Western Electrics, but there's Malatkis, there's RCAs, and UTCs make these big old passive transformers that were built basically for telecommunications, like for old telephone systems. So you just get some of these scrap kind of surplus transformers and try different things, put audio through them and see what they do. I could highly recommend a little experimentation there, and you'd have a lot of fun and maybe really change the way you do things.
But not the potato?
The potato filter, we measured it. A fellow from Waves came out because we're talking about putting together a bundle of plugins, of special plugins.
Okay.
Creating them. And one thing that I've been doing lately is just taking a guitar amplifier and going out of the speaker out of a guitar amplifier. And on the way to the speaker, plugging in various things like for instance, in this fellow, I was doing guitar through power tools. That was a lot of fun. But you can also use vegetables. You can use hot dogs, sausages. You could use all kinds of things. We tried apples. We tried carrots. We tried potatoes, and the potatoes actually work really well. And what we've measured is that there is a high. It's kind of a what do you call it? A high shelf. So it adds a little sparkle to your mix if you run it through potatoes.
See, that's the exact opposite of what I would expect a potato to do.
No, I know you would think that you'd have some kind of thick kind of thing happening, but no,
Yeah,
uh, it's more of a high shelf effect. So,
I'm
uh,
ashamed I'm being potatoist.
you
It's
know what? The sausages are very flat.
okay. Now I want to try it with a banana and see.
Bananas are actually very good too. We did try it with a banana. But yeah, and so now what were we talking about? We're talking about, oh, yeah, we were talking about potatoes. So potato filter. Yes, I would go for the passive transformer over the potato any day though.
Okay, yeah, and you'll have to tell us whether you want us to edit out the name of your secret weapon transformer there, because we could do
No,
that if you like.
go ahead and yeah, yeah, go.
You've reminded me about the underwater brass thing, because I, way back in the dim and distant past, I used to play trombone.
Oh,
And I can just imagine, I mean, I have no idea what that would sound like, but it must be really hard to play with the bell of the instrument underwater. I mean, that must be bizarre.
well, we did do trombone last week underwater, and it was fantastic. There's a lot of bubbling.
I can imagine.
But under the water, it was really fantastic. And then you mix that with the above sound bubbling water, and yeah, it worked perfectly in the track. It
I
was,
I can't
the
wait to hear it.
and the song was the band was hypnotic vibes, and you can imagine that there was kind of spacey music, so it actually worked out perfect.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Now, before I forget, I don't know whether you've come across a thing called Music Tech Fest.
No, I don't know about that.
It's run by a friend of mine, Andrew Dubber, here in the UK, but he's now, the latest one was in Berlin. He's out in Scandinavia somewhere, but it's just this, I think you'd love it. It's loads of people getting together. I mean, he says it's a festival of musical ideas. So people, the time that I went, they had people, there was a string quartet playing music that was being determined by people thinking, and their thoughts were being picked up on these kind of electrode skull cap things, and that would determine what music the musicians saw and therefore what the music sounded like. There was a guy who had an electronic accordion, which he had somehow rigged up with kind of receptors and all the rest of it, so he could use it as this kind of incredible MIDI controller. They have people beatboxing, they have people, all this kind of live stuff. It's just this huge melting pot of ideas. And they have this thing called Hack Camp, which kind of runs at the same time as it, where anybody can go along, and there's just, they have boxes full of electronic gear that anybody can kind of dig in and try and create some kind of new musical instrument. Or, they had people kind of putting bend sensors onto their hands so that when they flexed their fingers, it would, the change in the electronics would be picked up, and that would influence the sound. There's all kinds of stuff going on. I just think you would love it there.
Fantastic. Yeah. There, there's companies, Korg has little bits, Moog has build your own synthesizer kits with all kinds of different controllers like you're describing in it. It's a new era of invention, which is just what I'd love to hear about. There's ideas that I have yet to do too, obviously. There's a whole land of adventure ahead for me, in that I'd like to try experiments with different gases and running audio through different gases.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll need a pressurized chamber to do it, but that's something that will happen at some point, where, or even just as simple as taking neon, for instance, and running audio through the neon. I think that there's certain frequencies that will ignite the neon, and I want to do some experiments with that. There's several other things too.
I was going to ask whether you ever kind of sort of run out of ideas. There are so many that things you've already tried, and it's great that you're still coming up with stuff.
And in the book, the Recording Unhinged book, we talk about that too. The fact that really everyone has an oil well of ideas, and you're never going to run out. So don't be shy with experimenting and trying new things. And if you're at some point in a recording project, and you're not done with your ideas, well, go ahead and finish that project anyway, because it will never run out. So you just have to make a decision at that point that now the project's done, even though you're not finished with all the ideas you want to try. You just have to finish at one point and say, okay, it's time to move on and go for the next project.
I love that. Do you ever, I mean, for me, I haven't written much music in years, but when I used to, I wouldn't call myself I didn't write proper music. It was, I'd have kind of one idea, like, oh, I'll sample this. And then, there's a drum loop that I like, and this, that, and the other. And I would basically just take whatever ideas were in my head at the time and squash them together until they eventually made something that worked. I mean, Is there an element of that to what you're doing? Or do you kind of have this kind of list of ideas and you just pick, oh, that idea might do for this project and that one? Do you know what I mean? How kind of closely do you match your ideas with the project?
Right. Sometimes it's spontaneous, and sometimes these are things that I've planned to do for years. For the Avatar record that I did this past winter, was the plan was, since it was a Scandinavian band doing a concept album about a wolf and an owl, and a pike and an eagle, and this was their idea. It's kind of a Norse fable, let's say. I thought, well, let's do this project in a castle, because I happen to know where a great castle is with a Neve console in it. And I kept that one in the back of my head. Well, when the right project comes, we're going to this castle. And I threw it out there to them, and they were like, yes, perfect. So we went to the castle. And then after that, we went to an island in Helsinki to do vocals in a prison. And because I thought it was appropriate. Well, why not? And it worked out. It was fantastic. It was the perfect environment to get a great performance from the singer. And then I have always wanted to record a great pipe organ. And during pre-production for this Avatar record, I realized that they wanted a big dramatic ending to this album, and the rough drafts of the orchestrated part had a pipe organ. And I thought, well, check, we get to the pipe organ. So we found a church in Gothenburg, Sweden it was a big cathedral, and it had a huge pipe organ, and we got permission to go in there and record. So a lot of these ideas have been floating around in my head for years, but then the spontaneous stuff is also really great. I do keep a lot of hoses and ropes and other things available just in case, power tools, just in case we might want to go there. But sometimes it's not appropriate, and plus it's more important to get your foundation tracks done so that you're not screwing around so much that you miss out on the real important foundation parts, the drums, the bass lines. And so in order to really have fun, you have to build in the extra time that you need in these projects.
Yeah,
to be able to, blow a day on a stupid idea that doesn't work out.
I was curious, roughly, do you have any kind of sense of what kind of proportion of the crazy ideas make it to the final records? Because, you were saying, sadly, that throwing the electric guitar off the cliff didn't. Is it like 50-50, or is it worse than that, or is it better than that?
No, it's much better than that. It's more around 80-20.
Oh, that's
80% will make it into an album.
Oh, that's excellent. I love that, because I just remember I don't know, excited, but I was very interested. The Foo Fighters did a recent album, and they recorded it in Dave Grohl's garage. Yes. I love the idea of that and the kind of the attitude behind it. For me personally, when I listen to the record, I'm not convinced I can hear. He's kind of really excited about the garage sound that he got, and I don't know whether it sounds like the Foo Fighters, and it sounds like a damn good recording to me. But so yeah, I love the idea that you can do these things and that they really influence the final sound. I'm inspired by you and by the book. I don't know how much of this I will be able to work into my day job as a mastering engineer, but I'm definitely going to. I got a binaural microphone, one of these ones that you can wear in your ears.
Yeah.
For my birthday last year, and I'm kind of picking up, gradually collecting ambient sounds and interesting things from that and stuff. So maybe I need to resurrect my career as an off-the-wall musician to flex these muscles.
I encourage it.
I figured you probably would. Well, listen, thank you, Sylvia. It's been fantastic. It's so great of you to talk to me. And seriously, anybody listening to this, I mean, they can find details of the book on your website, right? Which is sylviamassy.com. Is that right? That's
right. Yeah, you can find details there. It's also for sale at the publishers, Hal Leonard. Also, Amazon is carrying it. Other retailers too. So yes, and thank you so much for having me, Ian.
The pleasure is all mine. Great to talk to you. It's fantastic. If you like this show, please leave a rating and a review wherever you found it. Head over to themasteringshow.com, sign up for the hot list, the email list, so you get notified of future episodes and any competitions or special offers we might have at any point. Take a look at the show notes. There's a load more information like this on my website, productionadvice.co.uk, and you can find me on Facebook and on Twitter at Ian Shepherd. This week's show was edited by John Tidy at reaperblog.net, and the music for the show was by Kaylee Law. Thanks for listening.